Good morning, members of Parliament, support staff, visitors in the public tribune, radio listeners and TV viewers, viewers via social media, and members of the media. Welcome to this public meeting number 9 for today, Wednesday, February 7, 2024. We have established a quorum of 9 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I have received notice of absence from the following members: MP Rolando Bryson, MP Peterson. Notifications. Before I open the floor to other members for notifications, I would like to express condolences on behalf of Parliament to 2 members of the staff of the Secretariat of Parliament. Ms. Gibbs on the passing of her niece and her great-nephew, and Ms. Gruen-Grums on the passing of her brother. We wish them much strength in this time. Does any member of Parliament have notifications? I don't see any. We have 2 agenda points for this public meeting. Number 1 is incoming documents. Number 2 is examination of credentials and admission of member of Parliament. We now go over to the agenda point 1, incoming documents. All members have received the list of incoming documents and the proposals for further handling under document IS/255 to 367 of the parliamentary year 2023-24. Are there any comments or proposals on the list as presented? To which member can I give the floor? None? If not, then the list and proposals for handling are approved. We go over to agenda point number 2. On January 11, 2024, in accordance with the National Decree of November 8, 2023, number LB-23/564, periodic elections took place for the Parliamentary of Country St. Martin as prescribed by the provisions in the Constitution as well as election ordinance. On February 5, 2024, Parliament received a letter from the President of Central Voting Bureau informing Parliament that Mr. Akeem Arundel, Mr. Edward Duran, Mr. Christopher Emmanuel, Ms. Melissa Gums, Mrs. Grisha Halliger Martin, Mr. Ardwell Irion, Ms. Silveria Jacobs, Mr. Francisco Lacruz, Mr. Kevin Mengret, Mr. Cloyd Marlin, Mr. Luke Marcelina, Mr. Omar Otley, Ms. Samira Roseberg, Ms. Ludmila De Weaver, and Mrs. Sarah Westcott Williams accepted their election as members of Parliament. This document is registered as incoming document IS/370/2023-2024. Between the 19th of January and the 2nd of February 2024, Parliament received the credentials from the 15 elected members of Parliament and a letter indicating whether or not they have a public function. In addition to that, the elected members of Parliament also submitted a letter indicating that they have not acted in contravention of the National Ordinance Registration and Finances of Political Parties. Those who have not been a member of Parliament before also submitted an extract from the Census Office. These documents are registered under incoming documents IS/331, 332, 333, 334, 337, 338, 341, 343, 348, 349, 353, 354, 358, 359, and 367 of the year 2023-2024. These documents are prescribed by Articles 104, 105, paragraph 4, Article 107, paragraph 1 and 2 of the Election Ordinance, and Article 53 of the National Ordinance Registration and Finances of Political Parties. Other articles of law which are applicable are the following. Article 54 of the Constitution, Parliament shall investigate the credentials of the newly appointed members and decide on matters which may arise concerning the credentials or the election itself, taking into consideration regulations established by national ordinance. Article 108 of the Election Ordinance. Parliament investigates the credentials and decides whether the elected person will be admitted as a member of Parliament. In doing this, it must be determined if the elected person complies with the criteria for membership and does not have a position that is incompatible with being a member of Parliament, and decide on matters that arise concerning the credentials or the election itself. Number two, the investigation of the credentials does not include the validity of the election list as published by the Central Voting Bureau. Number three, the investigation of the credentials of the person who has been declared elected according to the stipulation of Article 115 does not include matters concerning the validity of the voting. Article 2 of the Rules of Order. Each newly elected member of Parliament provide proof of his election by submitting to Parliament the documents prescribed by law constituting his credentials. Article 3 of the Rules of Order. Point 1, Parliament appoints a committee of 3 members which has the task to verify the credentials of the members of Parliament. The first appointed committee member shall be President. Point 2, if Parliament has not yet approved the credentials of the newly to be admitted members after a periodic resignation or after the dissolution of the Parliament, the committee is appointed in a public gathering in which at least half plus one of the legal elected members is present. Article 4 of the Rules of Order. Point number 1, the committee reports in writing or verbally after having verified the credentials, the other documents as required, and those received pertaining to the election. Point 2, the credentials and the documents related to them will be made available for perusal by the members of Parliament at the Secretariat of the Clerk. Before going over to appointing the members of the committee to verify the credentials, let me remind members of Parliament of the allotted speaking time of 20 minutes in the first round of this agenda point and 10 minutes in the second round. According to the speakers list, there's none. I will now go over to the appointment of the committee members. As members of the committee, I will appoint MP Sarah Westcott Williams, who is also the chairperson of the committee, MP Melissa Gums, and MP George Pantherflit. I now ask the clerk to hand over the credentials and pertaining documents. I will now ask the clerk to hand over the credentials and pertaining documents to the committee so the committee can verify these. The meeting is not adjourned while the committee verifies the credentials of the elected members of Parliament. MP George, be part of the committee. I give the floor to the chair lady of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and a good morning to you, to my colleagues, and all tuned into this meeting here this morning. Mr. Chairman, the committee has verified the credentials, and all of the documents are in accordance with the law that prescribes it, and these are found to be in order. And so we of the committee advise for Parliament to approve the credentials of 1. Mr. Akeem E. Arundel. 2. Mr. Egbert J. Duran. 3. Mr. Christophe T. Emmanuel. 4. Ms. Melissa D. Gomes. 5. Mrs. Grisha Heiliger Martin. 6. Mr. Artwell Irian. 7. Ms. Silveria Jacobs. 8. Mr. Francisco La Cruz. 9. Mr. Kevin Mingret. 10. Mr. Cloyd Marlin. 11. Mr. Luc Mercelina. 12. Mr. Omar Otley. 13. Ms. Shamira Roseberg. 14. Ms. Ludmila De Weaver. And 15. Mrs. Sarah A. Westcott Williams.
Thank you, Chair Lady and the members. Thank you, Chair Lady and the members of the committee, for a job well done. You are hereby discharged of your duties. The committee has proposed to approve the credentials of Mr. Akeem Arundel, Mr. Edward Doran, Mr. Christopher Emmanuel, Ms. Melissa Gums, Mrs. Grisha Heiliger Martin, Mr. Ardwell Irion, Ms. Sylvia Jacobs, Mr. Francisco La Cruz, Mr. Kevin Mengret, Mr. Clyde Marlin, Mr. Luke Marcelina, Mr. Omar Otley, Ms. Samira Roseberg, Ms. Ludmila D. Weaver, and Mrs. Sarah Westcott Williams. Does Parliament agree with that? Yes. Now that the Parliament has agreed to approve the credentials of Mr. Akeem Arundel, Mr. Edward Doran, Mr. Christopher Emmanuel, Ms. Melissa Gums, Mrs. Grisha Heiliger Martin, Mr. Ardwell Irion, Ms. Sylvia Jacobs, Mr. Francisco La Cruz, Mr. Kevin Mengret, Mr. Clyde L. Marlin, Mr. Luke Marcelina, Mr. Omar Otley, Ms. Samira Roseberg, Ms. Ludmila D. Weaver, and Mrs. Sarah Westcott Williams. I will, in accordance with the Article 122, Paragraph 1, Subletter A, B, and C of the Election Ordinance, notify immediately the Governor, the Chairlady of the Central Voting Bureau, and the persons admitted. I wish to congratulate all the 15 members elected with their admittance as members of Parliament. As soon as they are sworn in by the Governor on the Saturday, February 10th, 2024, they will take their place in Parliament as members of Parliament. Congratulations. Before I close this meeting, I would like to remind the admitted members that they have to submit a request to the Governor to administer the oath or declaration and affirmation as prescribed by law. The Secretariat of Parliament is able to assist members of Parliament elect who require assistance. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of this meeting. I thank you all for your participation, and I hereby close this meeting.